Whispers of the Crimson Mansion. They say every mansion has a story. Some stories are written in gold, sealed with laughter and pride. But this mansion was written in blood. I never believed in ghost tales. I used to laugh when people spoke about spirits wandering old corridors. But the night I stepped into the Crimson Mansion, I realized that not all ghosts haunt because they are forgotten. Some haunt because their love, their rage, and their death demand to be remembered. The mansion was cursed, tied to a love triangle that ended in betrayal, violence, and murder. But the dead don't rest when jealousy lingers. And I, foolish enough to walk into their home, became the witness, no, the prisoner, of a story that was never meant to be told. This is my confession. The truth behind the whispers. The night I found myself trapped in a mansion haunted by a deadly love triangle. I had always been drawn to abandoned places. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe I simply enjoyed standing in the ruins of something that once was beautiful, imagining the lives of those who lived before. So when I received the letter, my heart skipped a beat. It came in an old envelope, the paper yellowed with time, my name written in delicate handwriting across the front. To the chosen guest. At first, I thought it was a joke. No one calls me chosen. But something about it felt heavy, serious. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You are invited to spend a night at Crimson Mansion. Come alone. Discover its secrets if you dare. Midnight is the hour. Follow the path lit by lanterns." There was no signature, no explanation, just that eerie invitation. And I didn't hesitate. Something inside me whispered, "Go." That night, I drove through the countryside, the moon barely peeking through thick clouds. The air grew colder the closer I came. My headlights cut through the mist as the dirt road twisted like a serpent, leading me deeper into the forest. Finally, I saw it. The mansion. Crimson Mansion stood like a skeleton against the night sky, its windows like hollow eyes, staring down at me. The once grand walls were faded red, cracked and scarred by storms. Vines crept up the stone like veins feeding a corpse. And yet, there was something beautiful about it. Something tragic. I parked outside, heart pounding. The path leading to the mansion was lined with old lanterns, their flames flickering as if they were waiting for me. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The smell of dust and rot filled my lungs. And then I heard it. Whispers, soft, faint, like lovers arguing behind a wall. I froze, holding my breath. The whispers faded, but the air carried something else now. A tension, as though the house had noticed me. Inside, the grand hall stretched upward into darkness. Chandeliers hung broken, shards of crystal scattered on the floor like frozen tears. A grand staircase loomed ahead, its wooden rail cracked, its carpet moth-eaten. Portraits lined the walls, their faces fading under dust, but their eyes sharp, alive, watching. One portrait caught my attention, a young woman in a flowing crimson dress, her beauty frozen in paint. Her smile was warm, but her eyes looked sad, almost betrayed. Beneath her stood another painting, a man in a black suit, tall, proud, but with a face I couldn't trust. His smile was thin, cold, and next to him, another man. This one looked different. His eyes carried sorrow, his posture stiff, as though trapped in regret. 3 figures, 3 faces, the triangle. I didn't know their names yet, but I felt it in my bones. They were the ones tied to this place. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. Slow, deliberate. Someone was on the second floor. I froze at the bottom of the staircase. My eyes traced the darkness above, but I saw nothing. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, As if whispered directly into my ear, I heard the words, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. No one was behind me. I should have left. I should have run back to my car, driven away, and never looked back. But something pulled me deeper inside. The letter hadn't been random. I was meant to be here. So I climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my weight. The air grew colder, and when I reached the landing, I saw the hallway stretching in both directions, lined with closed doors. Shadows danced along the walls, though I couldn't see where the light came from. I reached for the nearest doorknob. It was ice cold. I turned it slowly and pushed the door open. The room was a bedroom. Dusty sheets draped over broken furniture. A shattered mirror leaned against the wall, its cracks slicing the reflection into jagged pieces. And on the bed was a dress. A crimson dress, laid out neatly as though waiting for someone to wear it again. I backed away, my skin crawling. The air shimmered in front of me, and for a split second, I saw her, the woman from the portrait. She stood by the bed, her hand resting on the dress, her eyes locked on mine. And then, she vanished. The whispers returned, louder now, fierce. A man's voice, sharp with anger, another trembling with sorrow, a woman's cry caught between love and fear. The triangle, the deadly love triangle, and I was standing inside their cage. The door slammed shut behind me, and that's when I realized the night had only begun. I did not sleep. I could not. The door had slammed behind me, as if an unseen hand wanted me trapped in that bedroom with the crimson dress. I stood still for a long time, listening to the old house breathe. The walls creaked, the floor sighed. Somewhere far away, a clock ticked in a rhythm that did not match any hour I knew. It sounded like a heartbeat that had learned to keep time with grief. I reached for the knob again, and it turned easily this time. The door opened to the hallway as if the house had changed its mind, or as if it had decided I had passed some silent test. I stepped out. The lantern light along the corridor was soft and uncertain, swaying in an air that did not move. I could smell dust, stale perfume, and the dry bite of old wood left to rot in quiet. The portraits watched me as I moved. The woman in crimson from downstairs was here again, younger in this frame, her smile less guarded. The two men appeared in different paintings too. The one with the cold smile stood beside a hunting dog, hand resting on the animal's head with careless ownership. The sorrowful man appeared near a piano, fingers hovering above the keys, his face turned away from the artist, as though even the act of being seen hurt him. I searched for a nameplate under each canvas, but age had eaten the letters. I brushed at the tarnish with my sleeve. Flakes fell like dark snow. My fingers found lines beneath the grime, soft ridges where names had once been carved. As I traced them, a whisper lifted from the metal, as if the engraving itself remembered what I did not. A woman's voice close to my ear said one word: "Elena." The sound was barely there, but I felt it in my bones. My skin prickled. I looked at the woman's painted eyes. They seemed to brighten, as though the house allowed them one brief breath. Elena. The name fit the red dress. It fit the sadness. It fit the way her hand rested, careful and tender, over the bodice of the gown I had seen laid out on the bed. I turned to the man with the thin smile. I brushed at his plate. A blink of metal showed through the tarnish. When my finger crossed the last letter, I heard a second voice, this one low and steady, with arrogance curling at the edges. "Victor." I swallowed. The word tasted like iron. I pivoted to the third painting, the one near the piano. I did not touch the plate. The name arrived anyway, carried by the faintest breath of music that was not yet being played. Samuel. Elena, Victor, Samuel. The triangle had names now. They did not feel like strangers anymore. They felt like roles I was expected to know, parts in a play that had not finished after the final act. I whispered the names back, testing them on my tongue, tasting their echoes. The house listened. I moved on. The hallway ended in a tall, narrow door. It was unlocked. Inside was a music room, long and dim. The moon pressed itself against tall windows, staining the floor with pale silver. A grand piano stood in the center like a black animal sleeping with its jaws shut. A cracked violin lay on a chair. A music stand held a score that the dust could not hide. The air smelled like old roses and cold ash. I approached the piano. My reflection wavered on its lid. My face looked tired and thin, changed by shadows. I felt foolish for a moment. I was a grown man listening for ghosts in a house that could collapse if I breathed too hard. But then a single key sank down by itself, and the foolishness burned away. The sound was soft, not even a note, more like a question. Then another key moved, and another. Invisible fingers traced a hesitant melody, as if learning to speak again. The music was not cheerful. It did not try to be pretty. It was a confession of regret, a song of a promise, broken and repeated until it broke the singer too. "Samuel," I said, "is that you?" The note that followed fell flat, like a sob that did not survive the throat. My breath came slow. I sat on the bench and placed my hands over the keys without touching them. The air above them was colder than the rest of the room, as if the piano had become a well where winter lived. I whispered, "I'm listening." The left hand took the melody. The right joined, higher and thin, almost like a child's voice. The tune wove itself into the room, touching the violin, stirring the lace at the window, sliding fingers under the carpet's edge where dust had curled it. I saw movement in the window glass, not outside, but inside the reflection. A woman in a crimson dress stood behind me in the shimmering surface of the glass. Her hands were folded the way people do when the only thing they can hold is their own pain. I turned. No one stood there, but the perfume of roses turned sour. The music stopped. A cold wind moved across the room. The doors behind me eased shut with a sound like a long sigh. The lid of the piano lifted, not all the way, just a few inches, like a mouth working to form a word it was afraid to say. In the stillness that settled after the music, I heard the softest scrape, like paper sliding over wood. I followed the sound to a small cabinet near the wall. Inside, wrapped in an old ribbon, lay a stack of letters. The ribbon came apart in my hands like spider silk. The letters were brittle and smelled like a disappointed memory. The first one was dated in a neat, old-fashioned hand. It began with a simple line, "Dearest E." I read it without meaning to. My eyes were hungry. My caution had already lost the fight. The letter spoke of lessons at the piano. It spoke of afternoons when the sun warmed the keys until they glowed and the music turned to a room of its own. It spoke of a feeling neither writer nor reader dared to name. At the bottom was a signature, Samuel. I opened another. E. It began, then crossed out, replaced with Elena, written quickly, as if the writer had grown brave between one breath and the next. This letter was shorter, rushed, and full of fear. "He suspects," it read. "He is not gentle when he is angry. He thinks I am ungrateful for the life he purchased for me. He forgets that lives cannot be bought." I didn't need to open more to know the arc of the story. It was always the same in old houses, love found where it should not be. A husband with money who thought vows were chains. A lover who put music to the things the heart could not say. A night when everything fell apart. Still, I kept reading, because the house wanted me to. The pages crackled. The script changed as fear grew. In one, Elena wrote to Samuel with a new clarity. "He will kill you if he can. He may kill me if I defy him. Meet me at the conservatory when the lanterns are lit. Do not speak to anyone, not even the maid. There are ears everywhere." A single drop stained the paper where the word kill bled into the fibers. It looked brown now, but I knew what it had been when it fell. The piano bench creaked as a weight settled next to me. I did not look. I could feel the shape of a person without seeing it. The air dipped under that invisible body. The wood whispered like something shy. A voice moved just above the surface of hearing, and the word it chose was my name. I jumped. I had never told it to the house. I had not said it aloud since I arrived. My name sounded careful and kind in that whisper. It came from the side where the weight sat. I turned slowly. The bench was empty, but my coat sleeve lay smoothed where an unseen hand had just pressed it. "Elena." My voice was smaller than I wanted. "Tell me what happened." Silence, then a rustle. The letters fanned themselves and the top page lifted. More words appeared, though no pen touched the paper. They wrote themselves as if a ghost had dipped a finger into memory and used it as ink. The letters were thin and shaky, but they were there. He said the house would always be his. He said even my breath belonged to him. I said no. That was the first true word I ever spoke in these rooms. The temperature dropped. The windows fogged from the inside, breathing a pale breath the way lungs do when winter first finds them. A nail popped in the floor with a sharp sound. From the hallway came a small, light tapping, like feet too careful to belong to a living person. I felt watched, not by a single gaze, but by 100 small eyes in the trim, the plaster, the carved corners no one dusted anymore. "When?" I asked, leaning over the letter as if proximity could protect me. "When did it happen?" The answer came from the piano. A single note rang out, high and needle-thin. Then another, lower, heavier, final. A clock I could not see struck 3 times, but the number it struck did not make sense because the window still wore the moon. I checked my phone. No service. The screen read 3:04 a.m. The same minute the invitation had told me to mind. The same minute the whisper from somewhere else in the house had spoken like a warning. The letters shuffled again. A date scratched itself across the margin. The ink bled as if wet, then dried in the span of a breath. It was the night of a storm. It was the night the lantern path was lit for a guest who did not know he was walking toward his own ending. I folded the letters and slid them back into the cabinet. My hands shook. The room seemed to wait for me to do the right thing, though I had no idea what the right thing was. The air pressed against my chest. It felt like a hand that did not want to hurt me. Only stop me for a moment, only turn my face toward a particular door as if saying, "There. There is where you have to go next." The door it wanted me to see was smaller than the others, almost hidden behind a velvet curtain that had rotted where the sun touched it. I pulled the fabric aside. A narrow passage yawned. It smelled of chalk and old coal. The walls were close enough to scrape my shoulders. My steps counted themselves in whispers. The passage bent and dipped. I felt my way by sliding my palm along the wall. The stone was cold and damp enough to taste like a cave. When I reached the end, a second curtain waited, this one stiff and dusty. I pushed through it and stepped into a glass-walled conservatory where the moon drowned the plants in silver. Most of the glass was cracked. Vines had come in to claim what people abandoned. The ironwork that held the panes looked like lace someone had left out in the rain. The floor bore the print of collapsed flower beds and scattered soil. In the center, on a little iron table, stood a music box. It was not covered in dust. It gleamed. It looked loved, even now. I wound it, because the place between fear and courage sometimes looks like curiosity wearing a thin mask. The box began to play. The melody was the same one the blind piano had just played. It sounded older in the metal teeth, like a voice that had learned to sing through pain. When the tune reached a certain bar, the lid popped open, and a compartment I had not seen lifted its own small door. Inside lay a ring. It was simple and gold. The inside curve of the band bore an engraving. I held it to the moonlight, and the words revealed themselves. For Elena, always. Another ring lay beneath it, thin and cold, twisted in a way that suggested it had been ripped from a hand, not removed. The engraving inside that one was almost gone, but I could still make out enough letters to read the name stitched into the metal with a craftsman's pride. Victor. I set the rings down. My heart went fast enough to trip. The glass above me clicked, a long hairline fracture lengthening with the pressure of old weather. The music box began to slow. Each note dragged its feet, as if walking toward a door it didn't want to go through. Samuel, I said softly, because I felt him here, his presence quiet and ashamed, like a person waiting outside a confession booth for a priest that would never come. Did you ask her to run? Did you ask her to stay? The music answered, or I imagined it did. The melody bent, as if the song itself shook its head. A shape moved in the glass near the far end of the room, not outside the conservatory, but within the reflection that the cracked panes made of the moon. A man's shadow, tall and square at the shoulders, stood where the vines were thickest. He did not move like a reflection, he moved like a person with weight. I stepped back. The shadow stepped forward. Victor, I said. The vines rustled. A branch slid across the floor like a finger trailing the path of a thought. The iron table beneath the music box shuddered. The box stopped with a small, lost sound. Leave, a voice said. It came from everywhere the glass had already broken, and from all the places the iron had rusted through. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was the command of a man who had always been obeyed and could not imagine he ever would not be. Leave my house. My house, a second voice whispered, touching the syllables with a tenderness that felt more real than the first man's certainty. My house, but only because it held her laughter. That voice was Samuel's. I knew it now, the way you know your way in the dark after enough nights walking the same road. Between those two claims, a third presence rose, quiet and strong. The air in the conservatory thickened, not with anger, but with resolve. It braided itself around my chest, and I felt steadier than I had a moment before. Elena did not speak. She did not have to. She was here, and that was speech enough. I can't leave yet, I said. You invited me. The rings trembled in their little nest of velvet. The gold band for Elena rolled to the edge and would have fallen if I had not caught it. It was warm in my palm, as if someone living had just taken it off. I slipped it back into the box and closed the lid. The click echoed longer than it should have, as if traveling down a hall I could not see. From somewhere deep in the house, the clock struck again. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers were wrong. They did not belong to now. They belonged to a night long dead, a night that the house replayed when it felt like bleeding a memory, just enough to keep it from clotting. The sound made the glass shiver in its metal web. I returned to the passage and crawled back into the music room. The piano waited with its lid slightly ajar, its keys white as bones that had forgotten the sun. I touched one. It was colder than before. I touched another and heard not a note, but a whisper tucked inside the ivory. It said a single word that was not a name, not a plea, not a threat. It was an instruction, spoken like a secret that knew it would cost something to tell. Below. I looked at the floor. The carpet had a pattern I had not noticed, a rose repeating, half-bloomed, circling a single darker bloom near the far leg of the piano. When I lifted that edge, I found a trapdoor no bigger than a serving tray, set into the floor with discreet hinges. The latch was simple. It opened to a square mouth of air that smelled like iron. I lowered the hatch and let the carpet fall back. I did not open it yet. The house seemed to exhale as if relieved by my caution. Elena's presence eased. Samuel's retreated to the corner where he had always watched and waited. Victor's did not move at all. It stood its ground the way a locked door stands. Tomorrow, I told the room, though the night was still thick outside. I'll go below tomorrow. I lied to myself. I knew I would go as soon as the house pushed me to, but saying the word tomorrow felt like borrowing a little courage from a future where I was still alive. I left the music room and walked the hallway again. Every few steps, I said their names under my breath. Elena, to remind myself of tenderness. Samuel, to remember sorrow. Victor, to name the danger with its proper face. I paused by the first portrait of Elena and held her painted gaze. I'll try to listen, I said. I'll try to do what you could not do then. I will not look away. A draft moved along the wall. Dust lifted and drifted like ash. In it, thin lines formed for just a second. I saw the suggestion of a word at the edge of the frame, a word written by a fingertip. Then it fell apart the way all dust does when breath touches it. But I had seen it. I had read it in the instant before it dissolved. Stay. The lanterns in the corridor flared and dimmed. The clock struck 3:04 again, ignoring the rules of time. Somewhere under the floor, something scraped. The house did not want me to sleep because sleep is a kind of leaving. So I stayed awake, listening. I leaned against the wall opposite Elena's portrait and slid down until I was sitting on the runner that had lost its color to a century of feet. The wood was hard. My back ached. But I did not move. I kept watch. It felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the first right thing anyone had done here in a very long time. I think the house approved because when my eyes finally did close for a moment, not quite sleep, just a blink that took longer than it should, the last thing I heard was the piano. Not playing, no, breathing. As if the instrument had lungs and had remembered how to fill them. And over that breath, the faintest thread of a woman's voice humming the melody that lived inside the music box. A lullaby for a man who had walked into a story that had been waiting for its witness. I let the sound hold me on the surface of rest. I let it carry me toward the hour I feared and the basement I had not yet opened. I told myself that in the morning words would make more sense. But I think I already knew the truth. In the Crimson Mansion, morning is only a different shade of night, and the only way out of a triangle is through its center. I slept with my eyes open, and the house watched me the way the dead watch the living, quietly, intently, and with a patience that can wait a century for the next breath. I woke with my back stiff against the wall, the portrait of Elena gazing down at me. My neck ached, my legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharper than it should have been for someone who had barely slept. Maybe the house had fed me its own kind of rest, shallow and uneasy, but enough to keep me alive. The lanterns in the corridor still glowed, though I could not say if it was night or day. Time had become a trick inside Crimson Mansion. The clock no longer measured hours. It measured secrets. Each strike was another reminder that I was moving deeper into their story, even if I wasn't ready. I remembered the word the piano had whispered. Below. I rose slowly, brushing the dust from my coat. My eyes lingered on Elena's painted face one last time, as though I needed her permission. She said nothing, but the silence seemed softer, less accusing. That was enough. The music room smelled of iron and roses when I stepped inside again. The carpet still hid the trap door, but I no longer had the luxury of pretending it wasn't there. My fingers pulled at the corner of the rug, peeling it back until the dark square revealed itself. The hatch opened with a groan that felt too human, as though the wood itself resented being disturbed. A staircase of stone descended into a cellar where no light dared to reach. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook with my hand, painting the walls with trembling shadows. The air was damp, tasting of rust and something older, something buried. My footsteps echoed as I moved down, and with each step I felt as though I was walking deeper into someone else's memory, into the marrow of the house itself. At the bottom, the cellar stretched wide. Stone pillars held up the weight of everything above. The walls were lined with shelves that once held wine, but now stood empty, their bottles shattered, their glass glittering faintly under the beam of my phone. In the center of the room, a table waited. Upon it lay 3 objects: a tarnished candlestick, a broken locket, and a knife. I didn't want to touch them. I knew better. But curiosity was the only rope I had, and I pulled on it even if it dragged me toward the gallows. The candlestick was heavy in my hand, its silver dull with time. Dried wax still clung to the edges. When I lifted it, I swore I heard the echo of a scream. Not loud, muted, as though coming from another room, another life. I set it down quickly and picked up the locket. The clasp was broken, but it opened easily. Inside was a faded picture of Elena, her eyes softer here than in the portraits, her smile warmer, real. On the other side was a photograph of Samuel. His expression was shy, almost afraid, but there was love there, unmistakable. My hand trembled when I touched the knife. The blade was rusted, but the edge still sharp. A dark stain clung to the steel, older than memory, older than me. As my fingers brushed it, a vision struck me so hard I nearly fell. I saw Elena, her crimson dress torn, her hand outstretched. Samuel, his shirt stained with blood, kneeling, gasping, and Victor, his eyes burning with fury, his hand gripping the knife as though it belonged only to him. The moment of betrayal replayed itself in silence, a painting come to life in my mind. The cellar grew colder. My breath came in white clouds. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered against the stone floor. The sound rang too long, echoing like a bell. "Why show me this?" I whispered. "What do you want from me?" The answer came as footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the cellar floor. I swung the beam of my phone wildly, but the light found only pillars and empty shelves. Still, the footsteps grew louder, closer. "Elena?" My voice cracked. "Samuel?" The footsteps stopped. A voice answered, low and cold, dripping with ownership. Mine. It was Victor. I didn't have to see him. I felt him. His presence pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. The shelves rattled, bottles cracking further, dust falling from the ceiling, and then another voice, trembling but defiant. "Samuel, no, not anymore." The air shivered. 2 forces collided in the cellar, unseen but powerful. My knees buckled under the pressure, my heart slamming against my ribs. Between them, Elena's voice rose like a thread of light in the dark. "Stop. Stop. You will never leave this house if you keep fighting." For a moment, silence held, and then the walls wept. Water trickled from cracks in the stone, running dark down the pillars. My phone flickered, its battery draining faster than it should. The light dimmed. I stumbled backward, searching for the stairs. My hand found the railing just as the cellar roared with sound, a crash, a scream, a note from the piano upstairs ringing through the stone as though the house itself cried out. I climbed as fast as I could, my legs burning, my breath ragged. When I burst into the music room again, the trap door slammed shut behind me. The piano's lid fell with a bang, silencing the echo. I collapsed against the bench, shaking. I understood now. The cellar was not just storage. It was a tomb. The objects on the table were not relics. They were evidence. The candlestick, the locket, the knife. Each one carried the memory of a night when love turned into death. And I had touched them. I had stirred their anger. I was no longer just a guest in this mansion. I was part of the story. I could not shake the cellar from my mind. Even when I left the music room, even when I climbed the staircase to another floor, the weight of that tomb followed me like a chain. I had seen the truth of their story: love, betrayal, blood. And now the mansion wanted me to keep digging. The invitation had been no prank. I was chosen because the house needed a witness, or maybe a sacrifice. The clock struck again as I entered the second-floor hallway. 3:04 a.m., always the same time. Always that frozen minute when the house bled its memories. The wallpaper here peeled in long strips, revealing plaster that looked scorched. The air was heavier, carrying the faint scent of smoke. My phone was nearly dead. I slipped it into my pocket, relying on the dim lanterns that lined the walls. Their flames bent whenever I passed, as though bowing to me or warning me. The door I opened led to a conservatory above the one I had already seen. This room was different. Less glass, more shadow. Plants long dead hung in skeletal tangles from the ceiling. The floor was cracked tile, half swallowed by dirt. In the center stood a fountain, its basin dry, its angel statue cracked through the face. What little moonlight entered seemed to hide instead of reveal. I heard the rustle of skirts. I froze. At the far corner, half hidden by a collapsed trellis, she stood, Elena. The crimson dress was brighter now, not dulled by dust. Her outline shimmered, as though she were made of memory, not flesh. Her face was pale, sorrow pressed into every line. She lifted her hand and pointed, not at me, but at the fountain. I approached slowly. The stone angel's broken eyes stared down at the dry basin. Moss coated its wings. When I looked closer, I realized the cracks in the tile beneath the fountain weren't cracks at all. They were words, carved deep into the stone. I brushed away the dirt and read them under my breath. Betrayal is the seed. Blood is the root. This house is the fruit. My chest tightened. Elena lowered her hand. Her lips moved, but I heard nothing. Then the air shifted and her voice came through faintly, like a prayer whispered from the bottom of a well. Find the diary. I spun around, but she was gone. Only the fountain and its curse remained. The diary. I remembered the stack of letters in the music room, but a diary? That meant Elena had left something more, something personal, something meant to be read only after her death. I searched the conservatory, lifting broken pots, tearing away vines. At the far end, hidden under a rusted birdcage, I found it. A small, leather-bound book, edges cracked, cover nearly falling apart. I held it carefully. When I opened it, the first page carried her handwriting. Elegant, flowing but rushed, as though written while looking over her shoulder. If anyone finds this, then know I did not go quietly. Know that I loved Samuel. Know that Victor's anger was the storm that broke us all. This house is no longer walls and wood. It is a prison made of jealousy. Beware the mirrors. They show what he wants, not what is true. My blood ran cold. The mirrors. I remembered the shattered one in the bedroom. I remembered the feeling of eyes following me in every reflection. I turned the page. I write this with hands that tremble. Tonight he waits below. He believes Samuel will run. He believes I will beg for mercy. But he does not know that love is braver than fear. I would rather die than belong to him. The ink blurred near the end, smudged as though a tear or a drop of blood had fallen there. The diary slipped in my grip. The air in the conservatory turned sharp. The plants rustled, though no wind moved. I looked up and saw him. Victor, his reflection, not in the glass this time, but in the polished stone of the fountain. His face twisted with fury, his hand gripping the knife I had seen in the cellar. He stepped closer in the reflection, though the basin was empty in front of me. "Elena is mine," he growled. His voice shook the tiles. Her memory is mine. Her soul is mine. And now, you are mine. The fountain cracked, a fissure spreading through the angel's face. Water, no, blood, seeped from the break, filling the dry basin drop by drop. The sound was louder than it should have been, echoing as though the whole house bled with it. I staggered back, clutching the diary. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I was trapped. The reflection of Victor climbed out of the fountain, his shadow thickening, his knife gleaming though no light touched it. I shouted into the darkness, "Samuel, Elena, help me!" The lanterns flickered. A chord struck on the piano below, vibrating up through the floorboards. The air warmed for a moment, and Samuel's voice rose in protest. "You will not claim another." Elena's form appeared again, between me and the reflection. Her arms spread as if shielding me. Her face was pale but resolute. "Leave him," she whispered, not to me but to Victor. "You've taken enough." The shadow snarled. The knife lifted. The blood in the basin churned as if boiling. And then, just as the blade slashed downward, the diary in my hands burst open, pages flipping wildly until one caught fire with a pale blue flame. The light struck Victor's shadow, and he recoiled with a scream that rattled the glass. The reflection vanished. The fountain cracked deeper, the angel's head snapping off and rolling across the tiles. The blood vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Silence fell, heavy and smothering. I dropped to my knees, breathing hard. The diary lay open, unharmed now, the flame gone. On the page, new words had appeared, written in Elena's delicate hand. "He cannot be destroyed, only endured, only witnessed. Stay, tell the story, free us." I closed the diary with trembling fingers. My path was clear now. I was not just a visitor in Crimson Mansion. I was its chronicler, its confessor. The house had chosen me to finish the story Elena had begun. But I knew Victor would not stop, not until he dragged me into the same triangle of jealousy and death. And as I stood in that broken conservatory, clutching the diary to my chest, I realized something far worse. Part of me had already become a character in their endless play. And characters don't leave the stage until the curtain falls. The diary felt heavier than any book I had ever held, not because of its size, but because of its truth. Elena's words were not just memories, they were warnings carved into paper. I kept it close to my chest as I stepped out of the conservatory. The lanterns in the hallway flickered weakly, shadows bending like figures bowing along the walls. The house was restless. Every board creaked underfoot, every draft carried whispers. I could feel Victor's anger still pulsing through the air, but I also felt Elena and Samuel nearby, guiding me forward. My hand brushed the diary's cover, the leather warm as though her touch lingered there. The corridor narrowed, forcing me into a space that grew colder with each step. Ahead, I saw the glint of glass. A room filled with mirrors waited, its double doors half open as if inviting me in. I hesitated. Elena's warning returned to me. Beware the mirrors. They show what he wants, not what is true. Still I entered. I had no choice. The hall of mirrors was long, lined with tall frames from floor to ceiling. Some were cracked, some perfectly polished, and others warped into twisted shapes that distorted my reflection into things I didn't recognize. The air was silent, but the silence was sharp, like teeth waiting to bite. As I stepped forward, my reflection followed. At first, it moved naturally, but then it didn't. One of the mirrors lingered, my reflection's eyes holding mine for a heartbeat too long before its head tilted slightly, something I hadn't done. I stopped breathing. Slowly, I raised my hand. My reflection raised his too. Then, deliberately, he smiled. I hadn't. The smile stretched unnaturally wide, pulling at the skin until it looked painful. My stomach turned. I backed away, only for the reflections in the other mirrors to begin moving differently as well. Some wept. Some sneered. Some pressed their palms against the glass as though desperate to get out. I ran my hand along the diary, whispering Elena's name, begging for strength. The reflections froze. Every face in the glass turned toward me at once. 100 versions of me stared, unblinking. And behind them, behind me, I saw him. Victor. He moved freely among the reflections, slipping from one mirror to the next as though glass was only a curtain. His knife glinted, and each reflection sharpened it differently. In one, the blade was clean. In another, it dripped blood. In another, it was broken, jagged, and cruel. But all of them pointed toward me. You see now. His voice rolled like thunder, though his lips barely moved. The truth belongs to me. Even your own face will betray you. I staggered back, but the mirrors closed in. The hallway stretched longer, impossibly long, mirrors multiplying until I was lost inside a maze of my own face. My reflection began whispering in dozens of voices, words layered on top of each other until they became unbearable. Leave. Stay. Run. Die. Mine. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound came from inside my skull. I squeezed my eyes shut, but when I opened them, the mirrors had changed again. I no longer saw myself. I saw Elena. In one mirror, she danced in her crimson dress, laughing, radiant. In another, she wept in silence, her face hidden in her hands. In another, she lay lifeless, her body crumpled on the floor while shadows leaned over her. The sight wrenched something inside me, pulling me between grief and rage. "Elena!" I shouted. "Show me the truth, not his lies." The mirrors cracked all at once. A thunderous shatter split the silence, shards raining to the floor. Through the fractures, Samuel appeared, his hands pressed against the glass, his face desperate. "Do not trust what he shows you." His voice bled through like a muffled plea. "He twists everything. Hold on to her words, not his." The diary burned hot against my chest. I opened it, flipping wildly until a page caught the lantern light. New words had appeared. Look for the mirror with no reflection. My eyes darted across the hall. Shattered faces, weeping Elena's, bloody knives, Samuel's sorrow. Then I saw it. A mirror near the end of the hall reflected nothing. No me, no Victor, no Elena. Just empty glass. I ran toward it, stumbling over shards. Victor's roar shook the room. "Do not touch it!" His face filled every other mirror now, his mouth wide, his knife slashing at the glass as though he could break through. I reached the empty mirror. My hand trembled as I pressed the diary against its surface. The glass rippled like water, pulling me forward. The roar behind me grew louder, Victor's fury shaking the walls. Then the mirror shattered, not outward but inward, swallowing me whole. Darkness consumed me. I fell, not onto stone or wood, but into silence, as though the world itself had been muted. My body felt weightless, suspended between the breath of the living and the memory of the dead. When light returned, I was no longer in the hall of mirrors. I stood in a small chamber lit by candles that burned without flame. In the center was a chair, and on that chair sat Elena. Not a ghost, not a reflection, Elena herself, or what was left of her. She lifted her eyes to mine. They were tired but kind. "You came," she whispered. Her voice was soft, real, fragile. "You came to finish the story." I took a step closer, my throat dry. "Elena, what do I do?" She placed a hand over her chest. The crimson dress shimmered, fading between silk and torn fabric, between beauty and ruin. "Witness," she said. "Tell the truth. Do not let him control the ending." The candles flared. A shadow moved behind her, tall and looming. Victor. His knife gleamed, sharper now than ever. He leaned close to her ear, his voice like a storm through broken windows. She belongs to me, and so will you. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her gaze stayed locked on mine. Stay strong. Stay until the end. The shadow lunged, the chamber shook, and the mirror behind me shattered again, pulling me back into the hall of broken glass, my own scream lost among 100 others. The hall of mirrors was gone. At least, I thought it was. One moment I was tumbling back through the shattered glass, my scream echoing among 100 broken reflections, and the next, I was standing at the bottom of a staircase that wound upward into darkness. The staircase looked endless, each step carved from black stone slick with moisture. A lantern hung at the start, its flame swaying though no breeze touched it. I glanced back. There was no door, no hall, only the staircase. The house had closed behind me. The only path now was up. The diary still pressed warm against my chest. My knuckles brushed it as I tightened my coat around me and placed my foot on the first step. The stone was cold, vibrating faintly under my weight, as if it had a pulse. I climbed. Each step groaned. Each echo rose higher than my body, spiraling ahead as if announcing my arrival to whoever or whatever waited at the top. The higher I climbed, the heavier the air grew. My lungs burned as though I were breathing smoke instead of air. Sweat chilled on my skin. My hand traced the railing, the iron so cold it bit like teeth. After what felt like an hour, I looked down. The staircase had no bottom. Only blackness stretched below, swallowing everything. The lantern at the start was gone, or maybe it had never been. The sight made my stomach twist. I turned back up, forcing myself to keep climbing. That's when the voices began. First Samuel. His voice trembled with guilt. I should have fought harder. I should have taken her hand and never let go. Then Elena. Soft, sorrowful. I loved you, I still do, but love is not enough to stop him. And then Victor. His words thundered down the staircase, cruel and sharp. You will never escape me. This house is mine. Her soul is mine. And now, you are mine. Their voices wrapped around me, rising and falling with the rhythm of my steps. I quickened my pace, but the staircase stretched. Always more steps, always higher. I glanced to the side. For the first time, I noticed mirrors on the wall. Narrow strips of glass set into the stone at irregular intervals. Each one showed me climbing, but not as I was. In one, my face was pale, lips blue, eyes sunken. In another, I was bleeding from the chest, staggering. In another, I was smiling, Victor's smile thin and cruel. I turned away, refusing to look again, but the temptation pulled at me. Each mirror whispered my name, each reflection moving slightly out of sync, daring me to believe it. The diary grew hotter. I pulled it free and opened it mid-climb. A new sentence had appeared across the page, written in Elena's delicate hand. Do not stop. Do not trust what you see. The top is near. I shoved the book back into my coat and forced my legs to keep moving. My thighs burned. My breath came ragged. The staircase curved again and again until I felt dizzy. My hand slipped from the railing once and I nearly fell. The blackness below leaned closer, hungry. At last, I saw it. A door at the top of the staircase, wooden, tall, iron-banded. The sight gave me a burst of strength. I climbed faster, each step echoing like a drumbeat of survival. But the voices followed. Elena is mine, Victor snarled. Her soul will never leave this house, and neither will yours. Elena, Samuel pleaded, forgive me for being weak. I forgive you, Elena whispered, her voice like the brush of wind over my skin. But you must let go. The staircase shook. Dust rained from above. The iron railing rattled violently. I clung to it, dragging myself upward until I reached the final step. My hand slammed against the door. I pushed, but it would not budge. I shoved again, shoulder straining, lungs burning. Behind me, the blackness below stirred. Something massive moved within it, rising, filling the staircase with a presence that pressed against my spine. I dared not look. I pounded on the door. "Elena, Samuel, help me." The diary in my coat grew scorching hot. I yanked it free, holding it before the door. The wood rippled like the mirror had. New words etched themselves onto the page. "Speak the truth." My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. Elena loved Samuel. Victor killed them both. This house is their prison, not their home. The truth is mine to carry. The door flung open with a roar, light pouring through. I stumbled forward, collapsing onto wooden floorboards. The diary cooled instantly. The staircase behind me groaned and began to crumble, stones falling into the abyss. I scrambled away just as the entire structure collapsed into nothingness. When I looked up, I realized where I was. The attic. Dust hung heavy in the air. Wooden beams arched overhead, draped with cobwebs. Old trunks and furniture covered in white sheets crowded the space. The single round window at the far end glowed with moonlight, illuminating dust motes like falling ash. And there, in the center of the attic, was a chair. Upon it sat Samuel. Not his ghost, not his reflection. Samuel himself, or what was left of him. His clothes were torn, his chest stained with a wound that never healed. His eyes lifted to mine, hollow but alive with sorrow. "You made it," he said, his voice hoarse, "but now you must choose." The attic smelled of dust and sorrow. Wooden beams stretched like ribs overhead, and the round window spilled its pale light across Samuel's broken figure. He sat in a wooden chair at the center, his posture rigid, his hands trembling where they rested on his knees. The wound on his chest glistened faintly, though no fresh blood fell. It was a wound that belonged not to the body, but to memory. He looked up at me, his hollow eyes heavy with grief. "You climbed the staircase. You saw what he wanted you to see. Now you must hear the truth from me." I stepped closer, clutching the diary against my chest. "Samuel, Elena sent me. She told me to stay, to witness. She told me the story wasn't finished." Samuel's lips trembled into something like a smile. "She was always braver than I was. Even in death, she carries the weight of both our souls." I pulled another chair from the shadows, brushing off cobwebs, and sat across from him. The air in the attic thickened, heavy with silence. I could hear the faint tapping of the house, the distant creak of walls shifting, but here, in this small circle of moonlight, it felt like the world had shrunk to only him and me. "Tell me," I whispered. "Tell me everything." Samuel bowed his head. His voice cracked as he began. "I was a teacher. Music was my life. When I was invited here to instruct, I did not know what awaited me. Victor had already claimed her, claimed Elena as his possession, his prize. He thought love could be bought with wealth, locked in with stone walls. But she was sunlight. She was laughter in halls where silence had ruled. I never meant to love her, but when she played, when she sang, my heart was no longer mine." He paused, hands gripping his knees tighter. "Victor saw it. He saw everything. And where love should have brought forgiveness, jealousy only sharpened his cruelty." I listened, my chest aching as though the story were carving its way into me. "The cellar," I said. "The candlestick, the locket, the knife. That's where it ended, wasn't it?" Samuel nodded slowly. His eyes glistened. "Yes. That night she begged me to run with her. We met in the conservatory, hearts frantic with hope. But Victor was waiting. He always knew. He struck me first. I felt the knife bury itself in my chest, the world spinning, my song silenced. I thought it ended there, but it didn't. I saw him turn to her. I saw her defy him. And then she fell. Whether by his hand or her own, I never knew. But she fell, and the house sealed itself in grief. His words rattled in my head, each one heavier than stone. I reached for the diary, flipping through its pages. New writing appeared beneath Elena's delicate hand, lines written in a harsher script. Samuel's script. I am sorry, Elena. I am sorry I was not stronger. I am sorry I let him take everything. But I will not let him take the witness. The diary glowed faintly as if the paper itself carried his resolve. I lifted my eyes. Then help me. Help me fight him. He wants me to be part of this triangle, to take your place, to repeat your story. I won't. I won't let him. Samuel's figure shuddered. The wound in his chest pulsed with a faint red light. You cannot fight him as he is. Victor is not just a man anymore. He is the jealousy that clings to these walls. He is the rage in every shadow. To defeat him, you must take him into yourself and resist. His words chilled me. Take him into me. Samuel nodded, eyes solemn. He feeds on weakness, on fear. If you let him in, you must hold steady. Witness, but do not surrender. If you falter, he will claim you. But if you endure, you will weaken him. Only then can Elena be free. The attic groaned around us, beams creaking as though the house itself objected to his plan. A shadow swelled in the far corner, stretching along the walls, filling the spaces between trunks and old furniture. Victor was listening. Samuel leaned closer, his voice dropping. There is no other way. The diary will protect you, but only if you cling to her words. Do you understand? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I think so. The round window dimmed, a cloud passing over the moon. The shadow in the corner thickened, and Victor's voice rose from it, low and venomous. Fool, you think you can resist me? You are already mine. The attic shuddered. Dust rained from the rafters. Samuel stood, his figure wavering like smoke, but his voice firm. No, he is not yours. Not if he chooses to stand. The shadow lashed across the attic, knocking the chair from under me. I hit the floor hard, the diary skidding across the boards. Victor's laughter filled the space, shaking the beams. Stand then, he roared. Stand against me and fall as he did. I scrambled to my knees, clutching the diary. Its pages fluttered open on their own. A single sentence burned itself across the paper. Take him. Endure. Samuel placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch cold but steady. Now, let him in. Do not let go of yourself. The shadow lunged. The attic exploded in darkness. Victor's voice flooded into me, sharp and consuming, a tide of fury and hate. My chest tightened, my mind screaming as his presence surged through my veins like poison. Images of Elena, Samuel, and blood filled my head, drowning me. But over it all, one sound remained. Elena's voice, soft and steady, whispering through the diary, clutched to my chest. Stay, witness, do not yield. I clung to her words like a rope in a storm. My body shook, my vision split between light and dark. Victor roared, Samuel prayed, Elena soothed, and I held on. Victor's presence raged inside me like fire. It clawed at my thoughts, twisting them, filling my head with voices that were not mine. Images of knives, of crimson dresses torn, of Samuel gasping for breath. He wanted me to drown in his jealousy, to become the next actor in his endless play. I staggered to my feet in the attic, my body trembling. Samuel's hand still rested on my shoulder, though his figure flickered like a dying candle. His voice was strained but firm. Endure. Hold fast. You are not him. But Victor laughed inside me, cruel and venomous. He is already mine. He feels my rage. He sees through my eyes. He will carry me when this house can no longer hold me. The attic groaned, beams cracked, dust falling like ash. The round window rattled in its frame, moonlight trembling. My knees buckled, but I clutched the diary against my chest. Its pages fluttered open, words glowing in Elena's hand. Do not let him speak for you. Do not let him take your voice. I gasped, fighting to breathe. My throat filled with Victor's laughter, trying to speak through me, my lips twisted against my will, shaping his words. She was mine. She was— No! I shouted, forcing the sound out in my own voice. My cry echoed against the rafters. I opened the diary and screamed Elena's name. Elena! Her presence filled the attic, warm and sorrowful, stronger than before. The crimson dress shimmered into view, her figure standing tall beside Samuel. She reached for me, her hand pressing over the diary. Her touch burned, but it was a cleansing fire. You are not him, she whispered. You are the witness. Hold on. Victor roared inside me, a storm of knives and fury. The attic spun, shadows lashing the walls, tearing at the beams. But Elena's voice wrapped around me, steady, unyielding. Samuel added his strength, his presence pushing against Victor from the other side. You cannot win, Victor. Not this time, not while truth has a voice. The three of us, Elena, Samuel, and I, stood together holding him at bay. My body shook as though it would break apart, but I clung to their voices. I am not you, I screamed. I am not your vessel. I am the witness. I will tell the world what you did. The diary blazed with light. The words on its pages lifted into the air, circling like fireflies. Elena's handwriting glowed, filling the attic with warmth. Samuel's script joined, lines of sorrow turned into strength. The words wrapped around me, forming a shield. Victor howled, his shadow twisted, clawing at the attic walls, trying to escape. But the words burned him. Each truth scorched his form. Betrayal is the seed. Blood is the root. This house is the fruit. The curse he had carved into the mansion was turned against him, his own rage devouring him. With one final scream, Victor's shadow tore itself apart, scattering into ash. The attic shuddered violently, the beams cracking, the round window shattering into 1,000 shards of moonlight. And then— silence. I collapsed to the floor, the diary still in my hands. The attic was calm again, dust settling like snow. Samuel stood before me, his wound gone, his figure clearer, stronger. He smiled faintly, tears glistening in his eyes. You did what I could not. You endured. Elena stepped closer, her crimson dress whole again, her face radiant with peace. She touched my cheek, her hand cool but tender. Thank you, she whispered. You have freed us. At last. The two of them turned to each other. Samuel took her hand, their fingers intertwining. For the first time, their faces carried no sorrow, only love. Their forms glowed softly, then began to fade, dissolving into light that drifted upward, free at last. I was left alone in the attic, alone but alive. The diary lay open beside me. One final line had appeared, written in Elena's hand. Tell our story. Do not let him be remembered without us. I closed the book gently, clutching it to my chest. The mansion groaned one last time, a long sigh, as though relieved. Then it stilled. When I finally left the Crimson Mansion, the lanterns along the path were dark. The night air was cool, clean, carrying no whispers. The house stood silent behind me, its windows hollow, its walls heavy but quiet. I looked back only once, and in the shattered round window, I thought I saw them, Samuel and Elena, standing together, watching me go. I walked away, diary in hand. I was the witness now. Their story lived in me. And though the mansion would always remember Victor's rage, the world would remember their love. If you have listened to this story, remember it, share it, Let the world know what happened within the Crimson Mansion, because stories are stronger than curses, and truth can set even the dead free.